actually called a group of people some snakes and vipers. But other than that, he doesn't say a whole lot. There's a few other verses. What Jesus does in his preaching and in his spread of the good news is just that. He tells the good news. Rather than to tell how you're going to die and go to hell, he gives you the plan of how you're going to be blessed. Chapter 5 does not give you the plan of how you're going to just die and go to hell. It gives you the plan of what it looks like to be blessed. Jesus does not have to point to swampland to sell you a resort.
All right.
Jesus does not have to point to a rusty hoopty to sell you a Rolls Royce. Jesus simply comes out and says, here is the plan. If you do this, wow, you're going to be so blessed. Jesus basically says, if you follow my brand, things are going to be great for you. You need to know who you are. In other words, you need to realize that you are the flame. You are the light. You don't have to do anything but be connected to me. When you're connected to me, then you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be under a bucket. You can sit on the hill and the whole world will see how good and how wonderful the blessings are that you have. Not only that, as you understand that, you ought to realize that you also have a place. You have a place and you have some positive kinds of things that happens in your life. Look at verse 14 and you'll see it. In verse 14 it says this, it says, ye are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. And so if you don't know your place, if you don't understand where you're supposed to be, then you know what happens is you become limited. Because when you're under a bucket, not only do you become limited, ultimately you go out.
That's right.
And so if the church is not relevant, if the church isn't doing and acting as the hands and the feet of Christ, which means to understand the process and to heal those who are needing your help, to help those who are hungry, to visit those who are sick, if we're not invested in that, then ultimately our limitations come and we'll go out. So we need to know our place. We need to know the positive limitations. But then look at 16. Verse 16 says this, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. So what we need to know is we need to know how to glorify God. We need to know how to glorify God. See, I lit this lamp today. And you saw that there was a struggle lighting the lamp. That part, Brother David, I didn't plan. It happened. In God's grace and God's time. And I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it happened, Sister Brooks, because the fact is, sometimes it's going to be hard to get us lit.
Yes. All right.
But it doesn't mean it's impossible. So sometimes we're going to need a little help. That wick needed a little oil put on it. That wick needed some patience. Had I walked away from it, it wouldn't be lit right now. But Brother Mason, is it still burning? It needed a little help. It needed a little massaging. It needed a little bit more fire. Sister Jasmine, I lit it. I blew on it. Trying to get a little more oxygen to it. The flame is burning now, but before, Sister Sanders, it took me some work to get it going. Far too often, the church doesn't want to do the work to help new flames come to life. But time is going to allow us to be each other's friend and to be kind to one another enough to say that I have time for you. I have time because God had time for me. That's what grace is. That's what mercy is. It is God saying, you're not lit right now, but I'll blow a little bit and let some little kindles come up. And if that doesn't work, I might have to cut you. I had to cut off the old part because I realized that if I didn't cut off the old part, I would have had an explosion. And sometimes we got to cut out some bad habits. Sometimes we got to cut out what we learned at the old church down the road. Sometimes we've got to cut out some of the things that Grandma told us that might not have been right and congruent with the Bible. We cut those out, and sometimes we got to start fresh. We got to start new. Let me tell you, the new year is coming. And in this church, on this Sunday, when we've lit that candle that expresses the hope and the expectation, some of us are going to have to cut out some old stuff in order to embrace the newness that God has for us and for this church. The newness that God has for families in this church. The newness and the freshness. God is leading us into a season whereby perhaps some starting over needs to take place. But as we start over with some patience and some love. And we realize that we can get a good flame going if we take some time. God has blessed you to be the light of the world. Now be the light. Don't sit in the box. Don't sit under the bucket. Don't sit waiting to be extinguished. Make sure that you have the Holy Spirit in you so that we can be led in truth and righteousness. I don't want to be filled with water, but you know, one of the reasons that I was able to keep on trying is because I had confidence in the oil that is in the lamp. Yes. I kept trying because I realized that if I kept trying, eventually I'd get a good flame because I know what's in the lamp. Far too often we don't trust the oil. And so we stop because this isn't going to work. But if you trust the power of the Holy Spirit, then you realize that we don't have to worry about whether or not we're going to get lit. I wish I had some young folks that realize that term when you go to the nightclub, you say you're going to get lit. But this Sunday morning, I'm ready to be lit in the church. Because I realize that the fire and the burning of the Holy Spirit is so wonderful and so great that when we come forth, the world says, look at the church. It's on a hill that cannot be hidden. And when we have that kind of blessing in our lives, then we're able to keep the lights on. We're able to keep the lights on when the rest of the world goes dark. And as she said it, we take the high road when they take the low road. We keep the lights on when everybody else is going dark. But we realize that it's not about who we are. It's about whose we are. It's not about what's on us. It's what's in us. And the more we allow the Holy Spirit to work on the inside of us, the brighter and the longer the lights stay on. Amen? Amen.